Welcome. Today, we are digging into a couple of really fascinating Fair Work cases that honestly shine a huge spotlight on your rights when it comes to redundancy pay. It's a story about what happens when employers try to plead poverty to get out of paying what they owe and how the law can see right through it.
Okay, you see a headline like this and you just have to know more, right? It sounds absolutely wild, but it's the perfect way to kick off our story today. It really sets the stage for a major conflict that went all the way to Australia's workplace tribunal. So, at the center of this whole thing is Susan Oram. She's a senior speech pathologist, and she was made redundant by her employer, a place called Freeway Family Doctors. The company basically told her, your role isn't needed anymore. But when it came time to actually pay her what she was owed, a very different story started to unfold.
So this is the number. We're talking over $10,000 that the company was legally on the hook for. But instead of just, paying her, they went to the Fair Work Commission and asked for permission to slash that payment. And the reason? They claimed they were in a really bad financial spot and just couldn't afford it.
The employer tried to paint this really grim picture of financial crisis, right? They argued that paying Suzanne the full amount would put the entire business at risk. But Suzanne Oram, she wasn't buying it. And the evidence she brought to the Fair Work Commission, well, it was pretty powerful.
And this is where it gets really interesting. You see this stark contrast. On one side, the company is claiming massive losses, big debts, including a nearly $50,000 tax bill. But on the other side, the business was still up and running, paying all its other employees. And then there were the expenses.
This right here illustrates Suzanne's point perfectly. She pointed to what she called frivolous expenditure, like $2,500 spent on birthday parties in just a couple of months. Now remember, the company wanted to cut her redundancy pay from 4 weeks' pay down to just 1. When you look at these numbers, they spent almost as much on cakes and parties as they wanted to give her for her entire redundancy package. Wow.
And it wasn't just the parties. Suzanne also pointed out that the company owned some pretty significant assets. For example, this vehicle fleet. She suggested they could sell just one of the cars to meet their legal obligation to her. The company's response was that it didn't make business sense. We'll let the commission be the judge of that. So, you've got these two completely opposite stories. The company claims it's broke, but it's throwing parties and sitting on a fleet of cars. The employee is saying, hey, you can afford to pay me. So, how did the commission rule?
Well, the commission was not fooled. Not for a second. They acknowledged the company had some cash flow issues, but they called them self-imposed. They pointed out that the company's income was still really high, almost $1 million in the last quarter. The problem wasn't a lack of money coming in, it was how that money was being spent. And they didn't stop there. They really laid into the company, calling its decision to hire new staff right after making Suzanne redundant an act of recklessness. The commission said it was just deeply unfair that her unpaid redundancy was essentially being used to fund the company's expansion. So this is the really crucial point. An employer can apply to have redundancy pay reduced. It's a thing. But the bar to get it approved is incredibly high. They have to prove they genuinely cannot pay. Not just that it's inconvenient or that they'd rather use the money for something else. In the end, the outcome was pretty clear. The commission tossed out the company's application. The facts were simple. With high income, valuable assets, and questionable spending, the company totally failed to prove it was unable to pay. They were ordered to pay Suzanne Oram every single cent she was owed. Okay, so that first case was about an employer trying to bend the rules. But what happens when an employer claims they don't even know what the rules are? Let's look at another case that hammers home a really critical principle. Ignorance is absolutely no excuse.
So meet Dr. Daniel Jewell, a chemical engineer. He makes 30 formal complaints about safety and management. What happens next? All of a sudden, he's made redundant. Then, to make things even worse, his employer holds on to about $70,000 of his final pay for over 3 months. And their big excuse for the delay? They just claim they did not know the law said they had to pay him right away.
The court's message here was crystal clear. It found that, okay, maybe the company wasn't deliberately breaking the law, but they were being insufficiently careful. And then came the hammer. Lack of care and ignorance of the law is no excuse. The company got hit with a penalty of over $18,000 just for the delay.
Okay, so after going through these two stories, what does it all mean for you? If you ever find yourself in a similar spot, what are the big lessons to take away from these rulings? So here it is. This is the playbook these cases give you. First, if an employer claims they're broke, just know their actual spending will be put under a microscope. You can't cry poor while buying birthday cakes. Second,
Their inability to pay has to be real, not a self-imposed problem they created. Third, and this is a big one, I didn't know the law is never a valid excuse. And finally, you have a right to get your money on time.
So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. Could your employer's hard luck story actually be costing you what you're legally owed? Because, as we've seen today, the story they tell about their finances, well, it might not be the whole picture. Knowing your rights and knowing that the Commission looks at the cold, hard facts is your most powerful tool. So stay informed.